Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the closing panel of Scala Days in Berlin 2016. We have a number of Scala experts up here on stage. We have 3 members from the Scala compiler team. I will introduce them individually later, but missing is Seth, who can't be here, and Stefan, who's taking a back seat in the audience today. We also have two members from EPFL and someone else. And I will, it's Dick Wall, who is of course most welcome up here. So I'm going to introduce each of the members up here individually. I'm going to do it in order of number of Twitter followers. Oh, by the way, there's an interesting fact about the people on stage at the moment. 3 people up here were born in the same country. Can you guess which country it was and who they are? And send me a tweet. Same city. Send me a tweet at Propensive. And I think 47 Degrees have agreed to offer a small prize to the first person who can, some chocolates to the first person who can guess this. Oh, so I might have heard the answer there, but the answer, the full answer has the 3 names of the people as well. So I'm going to check my Twitter feed afterwards and see who the winner is. Also, 6 people on this stage have all lived in the same country at some point in their careers. What is the country and who is the person who did not live in that country? Okay. The questions, more chocolate basically. The questions go both ways on this panel. So in order of number of Twitter followers, Lukas with 311 followers, and Can you tell everyone your Twitter handle so you can?
My handle is LRYTZ.
Okay. So with 311 followers, 313 followers, Lukas is a member of the Scala compiler team, and I think quietly gets on with a lot of the work in making the compiler. Well, you've been working on the new backend, is that right? Okay. So that will arrive in Scala 2.12. And you're also speaking at Scala World this year. I won't miss an opportunity to promote Scala World. Next is Sébastien Doeraene.
Seriously, I'm only second?
You are second with 1,180 followers. And Sébastien's the lead developer of Scala.js, and you're just finishing your PhD at EPFL.
Well, for some definition of finishing.
What's your target submission date?
You're never supposed to ask anybody that.
Between 1 and 2 years from now.
Okay, you've got a while to go. Okay, next is Adriaan with, it's getting close around the 3,000 mark, with 3,079 followers. Adriaan graduated from EPFL about... Oh, you graduated from a different university, but you spent...
That would reveal the previous question. So.
Right.
All right, sorry, I didn't want to spoil his question. So it's actually a different university.
And for the last 5 years, you've been leading the Scala compiler team at...
Feels like it, but it's more like 4.
TypeSafe. Okay, 4.
Yeah.
TypeSafe and subsequently Lightbend. Okay, and with 3,089 followers, Bill. Bill is a long-term member of the Scala community. You started out in 2006.
Yeah.
So you've got a decade now.
Yep.
Congratulations. I think that deserves a round of applause. And Bill is one of the authors of the Scala book with Martin and Lex, and you do consultancy and training with Artima. You're based in the Bay Area.
Yep.
And you've recently joined the Scala Center Advisory Board as the community representative.
That's right.
And we're very glad to have you.
Thank you.
So, who is next? Well, skipping over me with 3,110. Next in my sights is Jason Zaugg with 3,358 followers. I'm not far behind. It's gone up already. So Jason has recently come off a 28-hour flight from Australia to be here. So thank you for making. You probably made the longest journey of. Well, maybe there's some.
I think Peter Vlucht has probably made the longest journey
okay.
from New Zealand.
Okay, yeah, congratulations, Peter. But by being based in Australia, you do guarantee that with you're in Australia, Adrian's in San Francisco, and Lukas in Zurich, you do guarantee that the sun never sets on Scala compiler development. So there is continuous development round the clock on.
We're looking to hire in Hawaii if anyone knows.
And finally, last but not least, and in fact most, because you have Heather has 6,427 followers. And is dominating. Heather is a former PhD student at EPFL and now executive director at the Scala Center, and my boss. Welcome.
Thank you.
And with the introductions out the way, I'm going to jump straight into the questions. Now, we've opened up an online. What's it called, Adrian? Is it Slido?
I dare not pronounce it.
Okay, so if anyone wants to ask a question, I would recommend getting your phone out and going to sli.do, Slido/Scala Days, and you can write a question up there, and I'll be monitoring this on my screen, and I'll try to answer any questions that come in during the panel.
You can also upvote them too.
Yes, you can also upvote the questions that are there already.
I mean, those of you who prefer human interaction, feel free to use a microphone. John is against it, but I'll take questions live too.
Yeah, so if anyone wants to shout out to Adrian, and he will.
But then you'll only get an answer from maybe a couple.
You should also raise your hand before you just randomly shout, because I think that people have microphones that are going around. So.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So we had, I think, most of the questions. The biggest topic about on the Slido poll were questions about Dotty. Maybe unsurprisingly, and someone said, "Dotty looks great. When will there be a release tagged as stable?" Adrian.
Who? So I don't know. I don't set the Dotty release timeline, but I think the way that I look at it is that the question really that you should have asked was when can I start using features in Dotty, and the answer is 2.12, and the next releases after that, and at some point the release that is more closely related to Dotty. So for example, in 2.12 we looked at what the Dotty team did for the trait encoding and for functions, and they proved that it was going to work, and so then Jason did all the hard work to make that work in our set of requirements. So I guess we can go into a little bit more detail, maybe if there is a question around that, or later, or just we can decide to answer that question ourselves.
So what's the release date for Scala 2.12?
So 2.12 M5 is about to be cut. As a rule, we don't cut releases during Scala Days, but right when we get back in DJat lag, we'll cut the release, and that's the last milestone. We had to actually fix a bit of a snag that came up with the trait encoding and invoke super, but that's fixed now. And so RC1, hopefully second half of July is kind of what I keep telling them or else. And like about 3 RCs later, we should go final. So Q3, as we say in
around October.
Yeah, before
Do you think
October.
you
I
could
would
get it done by
hope, yeah.
September?
Sorry.
September maybe?
Yeah.
Late August?
When it's ready.
Okay, when it's ready. Okay.
But like let's say September, October timeframe.
So there was a follow-up question regarding Dotty, which is, will it be Scala 3? Jason, opinions on that?
I think that's the accepted plan.
Who decides?
Good question, Martin, I guess, yeah. I mean,
Okay.
it would be a kind of consultative decision to see what that means, but that's the question. We're sort of, I guess, on the side of that question, we want the jump from Scala 2.x, whatever that x happens to be before 3, to be as least painful as possible for our users. And so that's why we want to take steps in the meantime to bring features from Dotty back into the Scala 2 releases, or to bring in further warnings into the compiler to warn you against constructs, which won't be as easy to migrate. In addition, at that point of that jump, there'll be automated tools to help migrating source code to source code for certain syntactic things that are no longer supported, for example, but can be automatically translated.
So this actually maybe answers already one of the other questions. So someone's pointed out that Python suffered a protracted and damaging and still incomplete migration from version 2 to 3. And how can Scala avoid something similar happening?
Yeah, so I mean those are some of the steps we want to take. I think another step that gives us good data about how disruptive the change is the fact that we build ourselves something like 1 million lines of open source Scala code every night, and that tells us about bugs that we've introduced into the compiler or the library that day at some point around this hemisphere of the globe as we've been continuously hacking away. And that'll be a good tool for us to help as and when we get to this point of migrating to Dotty, that we'll be able to establish compatibility between programs under the new compiler. And there's still a lot of work to do to get there, but that's a level of confidence that we would want to have ourselves before we impose that on the world, to make sure that things are as smooth as possible. And so
Okay. I've just looked at the Slido poll, and the current trending question with 44 upvotes is
47.
It's gone up to 47 on Heather's phone. My laptop's a bit slow.
Someone write a bot or something.
50.
Is where is Martin? And we could. It's a bit like from up here. It's a bit like where's Wally? And we try to pick out Martin in the audience. Are you here, Martin? Hello. So the answer to the question is in the audience over there, enjoying the relaxing.
He's working on the compiler.
He's working on the yeah.
The guy behind him is nodding, yes, that he definitely is working on Dotty.
So someone did ask a very specific question about Dotty, which I'm going to pass over to either Adriaan or Jason, whoever wants to take it. But in Dotty, if A ampersand B is the same type as B ampersand A, and replaces A with B, how does it affect the whole abstract override mechanism?
It doesn't.
So for those of you who don't know, Scala has a feature which allows you to define a method in a trait as overriding a method with the same name, which comes from a supertype, but without actually knowing what that implementation is at the point you define it. And this is called abstract override, and it's a little bit esoteric. So I think a quick answer, if you have one, Adriaan or Jason.
Yeah. Would you?
I don't know.
It doesn't. So as always, types are an approximation of what your program is going to do at runtime, and the fact that A and B is the same as B and A is something that improves the theory or the elegance of the theory. And in Scala, A with B kind of cause problems in the theory, but these types are things that just describe which members are available and which result type a method will have, because with A with B, linearization determines what the result type will be of a method, for example. Whereas with A and B, these things are pushed down, as we say. So when you have a method with the same name in A and B, then A and B will have that method with the result type being the result type of the method of A and the result type of the method in B. So in that sense, it's more precise, it's more regular. But it actually has nothing to do with which method gets chosen in terms of overriding at runtime. That's not modeled by the type system. And it actually doesn't matter which one gets chosen from a typing point of view because both return types were ANDed together. And so that's kind of the artifact that we want to get rid of in Dotty, where with the with construct that actually is modeled and it shouldn't be.
Okay.
If you buy me a beer, I can give you an example. Sorry?
I may have a simpler answer.
Okay, yeah, please.
So there are two uses of width in Scala. There is the width that you use in the extends class, and there is the width that you use in a type. Only the second one is replaced by and only the first one affects abstract overrides and linearization order. So no and is not going to influence abstract overrides simply because it only replaces the use of width in types and not the use of width in extends class.
What Sébastien said.
Thank you. Thanks. Someone else has pointed out that whilst Scala 2.12 is just around the corner, so is Java 9. And are you planning to support modules in Scala at any point?
Yeah, so we've opened up a ticket that enumerates the list of work that we know that we have to do so far to support Java 9 in general, and modules is probably the biggest part of that. We've taken a couple steps towards that. So for example, in Java 9, there's no longer rt.jar containing the standard library of Java available in the distribution, and that's the first problem you run into when you try to run the Scala compiler with Java 9. So we've prototyped a fix to that uses the new mechanism to get to the same information that Java provides. And as soon as we finish 2.12.0, we plan to merge that change and look a bit more closely at what extra command line options we need to expose to you guys using the compiler to depend on modules rather than just jar files and so on. I think in general, the UI for that would be more or less what Java-C is offering. You know, the command line or the UI of our compiler is more or less the same. So we just have to work towards that. And as to when it might come, that's a sort of incremental feature that can be shipped in a minor release of Scala, so it can come perhaps labeled as experimental in 2.12.1, that sort of time frame.
So even before 2.13?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. And there was a follow-up, which is, are you planning to investigate JLink for 2.13? I'm not familiar with JLink. Are you?
So JLink is a new tool proposed for Java 9 that lets applications link together class files in some way, run optimizations, or maybe eliminate dead code, sort of ProGuard style applications. So I think as I understand it, it's a framework for tools like ProGuard and so on. It's interesting. I know that Dimitri's in Martin's labs experimenting with the idea of a linker and what that could mean for Scala. That would give you the opportunity, for example, to run the optimizer as a separate build step, not necessarily something you do during the original compilation of your code. And Lucas's new backend work, I think, sets a nice platform that even in Scala 2.12, you could reuse parts of the compiler that do the optimization on third-party jar files or your own jar files at a later point. I don't know whether JLink is necessarily important for that or not. I mean, we sort of can, I think, just do that as an SBT plugin without further work, but I haven't looked at it deeply enough to answer that.
We've asked some questions about the Scala compiler. So someone else asked about Docker and noted that many other languages have official Docker images available, and Scala doesn't. And the question is, will Scala one day have, or maybe soon have, an official Docker image? So, Heather, is that something the Scala Center could do?
Conceivably, sure. But I mean, this was actually the first time that it ever like entered my sphere of, oh, we should think about that. So conceivably, yes, I would have to figure out who would be responsible for keeping an eye on this and continuing to make sure that it's updated and whatnot. But yeah, conceivably, it doesn't seem like it's such a huge task.
Sure, yeah, I mean, it may just be a matter of blessing an existing Docker image.
Yeah, that or just making sure that there's somebody who is going to keep making sure that, you know, there's always one being published when things get updated. So I think that's the regularity point is more difficult to obtain. But yeah, conceivably, sure.
And in general, for things like this where Scala sort of has a gap, what's the process for if it is something that people think might be something the Scala Center could do? What's the process for proposing it?
So it's pretty easy to, if it's something that's, you know, clearly a great idea and it's not the world's largest commitment in terms of time and manpower, then, you know, like such as this, making sure that there's a Docker image published for Scala because every other language has one. I mean, yes, that's not a ridiculously huge commitment, and perhaps one of us could make sure that that's always happening at a regular, on a regular rate. But larger things, so one suggestion or one thing that you know has been suggested to us many times is like, hey, make Scala native exist, make it like awesome, make it, you know, production ready and These are things where I can't just be like, sure, we'll do that. This is something where it's a rather large investment. It's a lot of time, perhaps one or two people to work on it. And in this case, usually what we would do is we would go to this advisory board meeting. We would all have a discussion about, like, you know, make a list of the things that are really important and say, which of these things does everybody sort of unanimously think are very important and that we should look at and try to invest energy in. We kind of come to some sort of consensus at this discussion about the things that are rather important and largest investments in terms of time and energy. And we end up with a queue of these tasks. And of course, the amount of work is greater than the people that we have. But let's just say we have 3 or, you know, maybe 4 people, and they all have different capabilities. So given this enormous queue of stuff that's really cool that we should work on, we try to take the things that we get feedback from the advisory board meeting and also just in general from people, you know, discussing things, conversations coming back to Bill. We try to gauge how important something is, how much people care about it, and then from there, given the sort of the capabilities that the Scala Center has, the energy that we have, the profiles of the people that are working with us and whether or not they would be a good fit for some of the projects that we have, we try to sort of match the capabilities and skills of the people that are working for us with sort of the more important tasks that we know that, you know, generally everybody agrees this is a good thing that we all should have. And we try to match these things up and get those things done first. Again, I just like to point out that the list of things that we should have that's good for everybody is greatly longer than the people and energy and the money that we have to, you know, do it all. So it's really like a little dance where we're trying to sort of optimize the skills and sort of like the important tasks and match them up and get those things done first.
So Bill, you're the community representative. What would you like people to do as you're potentially a sort of filter for the Scala Center to sort of gauge the feeling amongst the community? That's you.
You know, I see my job, and maybe you can tell me if I have other jobs, but as just listening mostly. So I would like to hear what people want, you know, what pain points there are, what dreams you have for Scala, and then I would forward to the center. So the other people on the advisory board have paid money. So the community members are to sort of have a balance to the commercial needs, right? So that's what it is. So different, I mean, you just talk to me in the hallway. Some people do that. You could write a blog post and email me, and then I think that's kind of, if you actually have a few things to say, put them up on a blog post, and then let me know about it, and I'll tweet about it and tell those guys about it, and I think that's a good way to do it as well.
Yeah, and we'd like to add more community members to this board. But the only thing is that we're trying to follow the rules that, that are set in the bylaws. So at the next meeting, we're going to go and make sure everybody is like, yes, we, informally we all agree, but we're going to formally, change the bylaws and add a new community member, so long as, everybody still agrees in August. So we should have a second member soon. But yeah, we want to make sure that, there's more representation for everybody on this board.
So we have another question currently trending on...
Tied for second place.
Well, it's tied for second place, which is...
No, it's second place now. It's 54 votes.
Okay. The question is, where can I get a pair of those fabulous rainbow-coloured socks, Adriaan?
Same store as John.
Someone's asking about my socks. I can't remember, I'm afraid. I will tweet the answer later.
They'll be the gift for the prize for the second question that we started with.
I'm not sure how I feel about that. We've got a lot of questions that have been asked by someone called Anonymous on this list here.
Could you please stand up?
But I'm going to ask one from someone else. Sam Halliday has asked a question. He's not here, but nevertheless, he's made his presence felt by asking several questions. He notes that both Enzyme and the Scala IDE rely on the presentation compiler. But it has problems with macros, and it has problems with other things too, I'm sure. Are there plans to fix it?
Why are you looking at us? I don't know. Maybe Jason has a better answer than me.
So the presentation compiler works with macros. It's not an inherent problem with that. There are difficulties if you're using flavors of macros that compute return types, so white box macros. In the particular case that you're using Scala 210 with the presentation compiler that's based on the 211 compiler, a combination can happen within Scala IDE because they support multiple versions in this way just by using the newer compiler, but the newer compiler is not able to call old macros. So rather than expanding your macros to compute types that are needed, it just bails out and uses the declared types of the macro declaration. So that's if you're using white box macros, which are the flavor that's sort of less powerful, but also has less restrictions in terms of IDE support. And to the same regard, IntelliJ support, you're okay. So there may be other issues. I know there's been tickets that Sam's raised that we've helped out with in the past. I'm sure there are more, and we're going to continue working on this. As of Scala 2.11.8, the REPL itself is a client of the presentation compiler, so we're sort of, we use that every day, so we're eating our own dog food there. So we're interested also to keep it improving.
Okay, thanks Jason. So we've had quite a lot of questions about microservices and Lagome. We don't, I think, have a resident microservices.
Could the real James Roper please?
James, are you around? Would you mind?
Stand up if you're here. If you're not working on Lagome right now, which we should be.
I don't see
Scala
him.
James?
No.
So I'm afraid we're going to have to skip over the...
we only do macro services. So.
Yeah. So all future questions must be macro based. That wasn't quite what you said, was it?
No, it's okay. Close enough.
So there's a question. Do we still need abstract classes if we can pass parameters directly to traits now? Could that entire entity be eliminated from Scala?
Well, now is a little bit premature.
Let's say in parallel with trait parameters being introduced.
No, sure. So I'd love to add trait parameters to some Scala 2x version in the not 2.13, but maybe after that, or maybe 2.13. Who knows? So I think abstract classes will remain as an implementation detail that even with the new trait encoding, you still have some impact of the differences between our traits and interfaces, and we need to remedy those when traits are mixed into a class. So that's one useful tool that is maybe a bit more for the expert user.
Do you not think that having two very subtly different features, subtly different but distinct features, is potentially quite confusing for new users and potentially an easy win in terms of simplification?
Yeah, I think in principle, yes.
The specific advantage of an abstract class is that you can add a field to it, and a previously compiled subclass doesn't need to do anything further. Whereas if you add a field to a trait, a previously compiled subclass has to be recompiled because the storage for that field has to be in a class. So it's traits. The trait encoding in Scala 2.12 is less clunky in sort of when you look at how it translates to the JVM than 2.11, but we can only go as far as the JVM allows us. So I guess just to elaborate a bit on that point, in Scala 2.12, the body of methods in traits is now stored in the interface in the method because Java 8 allows for this. Previously, we had to create a trait implementation class, so T $class, and put static methods in there, which not only was unnecessary complexity in the compiler itself, but was visible as you were debugging your code and looking at stack traces. But if Java supported default fields in interfaces, we could go further. But until such time, abstract classes do have some important binary compatibility.
Do you have any way of lobbying for that?
It's a good question, actually. What relationship do we have with OpenJDK and Oracle, who's doing most of the work and contribution? At the moment, we don't have the sort of relationship where we can participate in their community process and lobby for change in a way that is really helpful for our users, because it's sort of 5 years sort of timeframes before the results are needed. So that said, we are trying to get better at being part of the community. I think even though we're limited in the size of our team and our resources and time, we do want to build a better bridge there. So for the last couple of years, members of our team have been heading to JVM Language Summit. Lukas presented last year, I think, or the year before. Yeah, last year. And that just gives us an informal way to stay in touch with the engineers who are working on the JVM.
What are those summits like, Lukas? Sorry? What are those summits like?
So those summits are basically meetups of people compiling to the JVM, let's say. So that's most famously Java, and then JRuby, Groovy, and then there's projects that affect maybe our bytecode a bit less, like compiling JavaScript to the JVM. So there's lots of work on using the new dynamic features of the JVM. In also some Oracle internal projects is Nashorn VM, which executes JavaScript on the JVM. And other than that, it's a conference with presentations, talks. I talked about Scala's value classes because, as you might know, Java, some people working on the JVMs, on Brian Getz, is spending a lot of time thinking about value classes and specialization, how to implement that on a JVM level. And so I just presented like the state of art in Scala. How do we do it? What can we do? Where are the limitations?
Okay, thank you, Lukas. So Heather just alerted me to probably the most important question we'll get on the panel. I'm going to ask the same question to everybody and ask you to raise your hands. Spaces or tabs? Votes for tabs. And votes for spaces. And the audience as well. Spaces? Oh yeah. Okay. How many? Two.
Yeah,
Two.
0.
It's 2 or it's 2 or 4 depending on whether it's indentation or continuation.
Ooh. Now it's getting
You,
complicated.
you can read the Scala JS style guide. It explains it.
Could we not just use Scala format and
Isn't there the
write
Sebastian
whatever the hell
setting?
we like?
Sorry?
Could we not just use Scala format and write whatever the hell we like in our white space?
Well, sure, but yeah, Scala format has some defaults, and depending on the style that you use, it will apply one or the other. Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
If you use the Scala JS style, it will apply to 4 spaces and continuations.
And just to extend the question to the audience, who uses anything other than 2 spaces for indentation?
And we're a very
Hand up.
tolerant community, so
Yes.
I don't think.
Don't
you
be
should afraid.
embarrassed
There
to
you go.
raise your
See,
hand.
brave. That's fine. Oh, there you go.
It's one.
So I'm tempted to think we might have solved this age-old problem.
I think by
The correct answer is 2 spaces.
yes, we have peer pressure.
How
maybe.
long before this can be enforced by the compiler?
Where's my laptop?
I mean, it worked for makefiles, didn't it?
I like to write little white space poems, so I don't really want to I don't want to standardize.
Okay, so there's maybe a more serious question being asked about about Project Jigsaw. Will Scala and SBT take advantage of Project Jigsaw in any sense? Now, I hadn't heard of Project Jigsaw.
That's
Maybe-
Java 9, so we kind of answered it.
Oh, okay.
Not maybe in the level of detail that they were hoping for, but
Right. Okay. I didn't. I'm showing my naivety
terrible,
now.
John. Terrible.
Yeah. I don't know anything about Java. Yeah, I copy pasted the explanation of Project Jigsaw into my notes, and I was going to read that out, but I guess that's not so relevant now. It's Java 9. So, are there any other good questions, Heather?
Oh, it just crashed. Hold on.
So here's a question which I'm going to ask to probably Sébastien and.
Feels like you're emailing
and
your
Lukas.
neighbor across the street because they're right there.
Say again, Bill?
I feel like we're emailing our neighbor across the street instead of just walking over there and talking to them because you guys are right here. You can raise your hand too.
I missed it. I've got a question here. What's it like, Sébastien, doing a PhD under Martin? And then I'm going to ask the same question to Lukas and Heather.
Oh.
Well, I can ask whoever is most willing to answer first, and then everyone else can just say me too.
Probably the best thing is that if you're willing to do your thing, and you can. So if you have a lot of ideas and you can progress on your own, that's a very nice thing because you have the opportunity to do that. And also, a second thing, which is really cool, especially to me, is that you have the opportunity to work on things that matter. I mean, in an immediate sense. So, I mean, look at Scala JS. It's reportedly a very difficult PhD project in the sense that it's very hard to publish in academic journals about it. But I still get to do a PhD on that, and I get to work on something that is used by, we have estimated a few thousands of developers at the moment, and the feedback loop is immediate, and I really love that. So I think these are the 2 most important things about doing a PhD in this lab.
Okay, thanks, Sébastien. Lukas, what's your experience? It's been how many years since you finished now?
I think 2.5 years since I finished.
Still a recent
Yeah,
memory.
yeah. Still, I still know a lot of people in the lab.
Did you say trauma, Adriaan?
Well, writing a dissertation, have you? I still haven't gotten over it.
So I was lucky enough that by the time I finished, there happened to be an open position in this company, and I worked a little bit on some Scala compiler stuff before, which I always enjoyed to most degrees. And yeah, I think I completely agree with Sébastien. These are the two most important things. You can work on really cool stuff that impacts people, and you get to choose to a large degree what you want to work on. So.
Thanks. Heather, do you have anything to add?
No, actually, I'm going to invoke the Me Too right, because Sébastien did a very good job of summarizing kind of the nice situation that you have the ability to work on things that are immediately relevant. Because I mean, if you're bored and you're kind of looking around in these academic journals, sometimes a lot of stuff just seems really out there, and maybe it will one day be relevant and cool and find its way into something that people care about. But a lot of the stuff, it's kind of difficult to see how maybe it will be attached to anything realistic. And working on Scala and around Scala, it's always a lot more immediate, a lot more quickly. It's a lot easier to see how quickly something can become relevant. So that's one very cool thing about working in this group.
So me too.
Me too.
Indeed, yes. So someone's asked, what's the book you're reading, Adriaan? I can see from here it's got some notes about code.
Yeah, it's my little red book where I was listing the badges of people who said more than 2 spaces.
But just to ask the question to the panel, what books do you have beside your bed at the moment, if any? Bill, I'm sure you're reading something interesting.
I'll come back to me at the end.
Programming in
Let's look
Scala,
around.
third edition.
The thing is, I had to spend so much time writing that I couldn't have any spare time to read. But I've been reading mysteries, so that's it.
Okay. Is anyone else reading a book at the moment? What does the Scala compiler team do to wind down, if you ever do?
Yeah, well, gotta sleep once in a while. No, we actually have a pretty good work-life balance at Lightbend. I mean, I guess the most recent book that I liked reading was The Wisdom of Insecurity by Alan Watts. It's a pretty old one. Yeah.
Any other book recommendations?
I wasn't going to recommend. To literally answer your question,
yes.
It's a book I haven't read, but it's sitting next to me next to my bed. It's The Making of the Atomic Bomb, I think, by this guy who won a Pulitzer Prize for that. Yeah.
Cool. Awesome.
Yeah.
To learn something.
It's not a hands-on kind of book, but as far as I understand from what it says on the cover, anyway. But.
So you mentioned there's quite a good work-life balance at Lightbend. Lightbend's just had $20 million of Series C investment.
Yeah. So they all send us on vacation.
What material difference will that make to the compiler team, if any?
I think this last round is more about expansion, and we had a pretty heavy emphasis on engineering hiring in the past, and so this investment is actually going more towards expanding in the market. Basically, most teams in Lightbend vary between 1 and 7 people. We're at 5, so maybe I hope we'll add one more person. But I think once you get past that, we're about 100 people in the company, and yeah, my boss is here, so I don't want to put a number on how many in engineering, but I would say it's about 60% or something like that. I actually don't remember. We've grown a lot. Is it not?
Depends whether you count radius.
Yeah. Yeah. So I don't know. Like it's about like that. The funding will impact us in the sense that if we're successful, we can keep investing in Scala, and for us, the drive behind that and behind our team is basically world domination for Scala, right? And making Scala popular and doing everything we can, and as we've been doing over the last couple of years, ensuring stability between releases, having a story to tell to both the enterprise customer and the community, so that we can really keep pushing Scala forward. A little bit slower than in the past, but I think that's a feature. I think Diana would like us to wrap up, John. So
yeah.
Maybe
There was. We'll have one more question. There was a rhetorical question which I'll give an honourable mention to, which was how can anyone trust my libraries if I can't remember where I bought my socks? But the currently the currently trending question is, are there any plans to make FP, or category theory, a first-class citizen in the Scala Standard Library instead of in external libraries such as CATS or Scala Z?
So I've got experience working on Scala Z a couple of years ago. I was a fairly prolific contributor for a year or two. And I know how big a problem it is and how consuming a problem it is to do a good job at that. And I think the community is doing a pretty good job at trying to come up with a coherent encoding of these concepts. And it's not something that we think we can do a better job at. So I know there are times when I wish, oh, it'd be nice if we sort of had a sort of a show type class or mono type class, because we could extend our standard library a little bit. But there are certain difficulties with the way you provide the instances of these type classes that the guys in CATS and Scala Z are still innovating and trying to find the right solutions for and the best solutions for. So I think the status quo is how we see things staying for now.
Yeah. So we'll get the most benefit from keeping things outside of the standard library, evolving at probably a faster rate.
Mm-hmm.
And
like we've done for the other modules. I think if anything happens to the library, and it will, not if, when, it's making it smaller so that the community can experiment and evolve and maintain and so on.
The flip side is that we are looking at ways to make it easier for people to find libraries that they're looking for, and that's one of the things that Scala Center is trying to do with the help of the community. So.
Yeah, absolutely. That is all the time we've got for questions. So thank you everyone for coming. I hope you've had a wonderful Scala Days. Can we thank the panel? Bill Venners, Sébastien Doeraene, Heather Miller, Adriaan Moors, Jason Zaugg, and Lukas Rytz. Thank you.
And Jon Pretty as well.